There's nothing quite like a dungeon to bring about thoughts of adventure and creativity and story and excitement and danger. And in fact, it has been said that Dungeons and Dragons, the game, was just invented so that dungeons like that could be explored. And I have written about the importance of dungeons, the narrative importance of dungeons, the emotional importance of dungeons in this book, A Place Underground, or Dungeon Theory for All, where I have an essay about dungeons and then a D66 literary table of dungeon prompts. And I've done a video on this book, and I'll put the link to that video somewhere here. This video is not about this book. This video is about something else, but it is very much prompted by the ideas in A Place Underground, by the concepts of what the importance of dungeons to players. And this video, and indeed this project that I'm going to embark on, is prompted by the Dungeon Year Design Journal. This is the condensed version of this, and I will show you and discuss what it is first, and then talk about how I plan to use this journal and keep you updated at least one more time at the end of next year about how I have used this journal. You can see the credits here, and I thank the publisher for sending me a copy of this at my request. I was really excited to discover that this existed because I was familiar with the creative challenge that prompted this, and that was started by Sean McCoy, who designed Mothership RPG, and the concept was to build a mega dungeon, one room a day in 2023, consisting of 12 levels with 28 to 31 rooms each, and hashtag Dungeon 23. And the publishers of this say his initiative sparked the idea of this journal and the Dungeon Year to create something one piece at a time until you have completed 365 details: rooms, characters, cultures, maps, stars, gods, items, and more. When you're done, maybe you'll have a massive interstellar spaceship, a new world to explore, a community of people and their relationships, a city, or even a dungeon. Create anything you want. So, how to use this journal? This particular journal is the one that is the weekly journal, and there's a larger version that is daily, and I was torn between both of them, but I chose this one because it does have, as we'll see in a minute, some random tables at the beginning, and I like the orientation of these better than the orientation of the ones in the bigger journal, even though I was sort of interested in the bigger journal too. In any case, what I'll walk you through what it says about using it, and then I'm going to explain how I plan to use it, which is slightly different, and that gets into these books here, which is going to be sort of the second part of this video. There are daily entries that you can have in 352 weekly spreads. Each one has a place for you to write notes, encounters, tables, descriptions, and then it has a grid for drawing, and you can make an identification, a date, and a connection. And the ID field is to give your diary your unique entry. The connection, and this is significant in terms of how I plan to use it, are what this individual thing connects to. Is it connecting to another room, if it's a room, or if it's an NPC, perhaps it's a connection to the building that they're in or who they have a relationship with. And then there is a small box in the entry which can associate what you've written to what you've drawn. So here's the example of it. It's pretty straightforward and simple. I mean, this is all the spreads. I mean, they're very basic. There's the grid on the right-hand side, and what's being discussed right now on the left-hand side, the ID, date, connections, and then these entry boxes here. The dot grid paper we can see, and then the day tracker. So each day that you work in your design journal, tick off a day on the tracker. It could be a simple counter or a calendar. How you use it is up to you. Then there are some tables, which we will look at, and a lot of them are D66 tables. And it has some instructions for how to start. So you could pick an idea, or if you already have an idea, great. You could choose to roll on the idea generation table, gets you thinking about something. You could begin at the beginning, like building a dungeon. And of course, we've seen on this channel and elsewhere, there are actual games that have been created that do walk you through the entire creation of one dungeon and its use over time. You could opt to do something like that. Or it says optionally every, week or two or month, pick a theme by rolling on the theme table and relate what you make during that time, that week, that day, whatever, to that theme. And then there's also a table here that is like a little oracle. So today, let's do this. Let's make an encounter, or let's make an adventure hook. Or you have a little oracle table here to use. So you can almost play this out as a game. And those are the instructions. And then you have your day tracker here beginning with January. So it is by month, but you can write in the dates if you choose to when you're actually doing it, whether you do it every day, which up front, I'm going to say that's not my plan. That's way too ambitious for me. And I'm not even sure I'm going to fill in the dates that I actually do it. I may just leave this blank. I haven't decided that yet. And then we have the tables, and we will take a look at the tables here so you can see what's included in the journal itself. And then I'll talk about what I plan to use, which is definitely this, but also other things. So we have the aforementioned idea journal where you can roll and just get your D66 idea. So a 32 would be something neon. Well, that's pretty, as somebody who's not an artist, that would be tough for me. But like if you were a real artist, that'd be cool to have some neon based idea for a journal. Or we have here something acidic. So could be like a theme for your journal, or maybe this could tie into some other table that you roll on to give it some direction. We have a fantasy objects table. So wow, I'm rolling a lot of 3s and 4s. So we have here something that is spell binding. So some object that is spell binding, or something that is oil. We have a whole table of cyberpunk objects, something specifically cyberpunked, which might be an intelligence. So some cyberpunk intelligence, maybe that could be an NPC. Again, maybe that could be used to give some direction. A table of horror objects, like a horrible painting or mirror, or something that's bewitched or arcane. We have space here. We have planetary locations, and then we have different types of rooms. We have fantasy rooms. We have something that's called modern rooms. So you can see it's really giving you there's a lot of breadth here, and you could choose to use that as you wanted. Flora and fauna for the dungeon that you may be doing. Biomes. We even have weather, so it could be some sort of outside lair that is a dungeon, because of course, as we know, dungeons are not just something that are underground in a castle, but it refers more to a self-contained type of structure. We have something here called a funky table that says roll and then add to any other tables, roll and add some funk. So we could add, there's like beak or milk or a mushroom. And then we have the table that was mentioned that was a theme table. So this is, you could change it up every week or so. So for example, here on a 2-6, a bridge theme, or let's say it was a 6-2, a theme of excess. So obviously it's up to you. These are completely suggestive, and there's, clearly not a mandate to do any one thing, but I'm just trying to give you a sense of what's offered here. There's a town generator, so you could roll for whatever you need here. This is a D20 table, but it offers very many options, like the geography. Does the town do trading? Is there a cultural influence? Who's it governed by? Some sort of historical event that is or was in the town. Something about the town defense. Who is powerful? a landmark, districts in the town, threats to the town. And honestly, like this in and of itself could be extremely useful just in any other game, because it will give you the general structure of a setting. Or maybe you create a town and that has to do with where your dungeon, impacting what the dungeon is or what it relates to. We have populations for the town, how many there are. These are sort of like fantasy creatures, merfolk, gnomes, titans might live there, as well as some factions for towns, what the faction goals could be, who is the leader of the faction, what type of resources they have, and what type of relationships they create. So things that go outside the traditional structure of like an underground dungeon, but definitely provide a foil almost for the structure that you might be creating. And then we have a D66 NPC generator that has a couple of different columns of physical traits, their personality, their occupation, their background. So you could just choose to, ignore some of these tables if they weren't relevant to what you wanted to do or know about, or roll on all of them to create an NPC. And we even have a name generator here. And there is finally an additional resources section here that says that Andrew Duvall has done a fantastic job building a list of resources to help in your journey. There's a link here, and then it says, when in doubt, look about. There are thousands of people creating content to help you, of course. And Sean McCoy himself, who was the creator of the dungeon, #Dungeon23, says, don't overthink it. Generators are your friend. If you can't think of what to write that day, just write empty room and move on. And some instruction on actually trying to do 365 rooms and saying the goal is the finish line, just get there. And then there is a request to share the work. So that is the structure of this. And then it has a few pages that are just blanks here that you could, if you were really working on just one thing that was all connected, I suppose at the end you could miniaturize it and put it on these spreads, or just use these spreads for notes. And then it begins with the spreads that I talked about at the beginning of the video, and continue. And then the rest of the journal is those spreads, or are those spreads. Now, for me, we'll just look here. Build your adventure, city, community, dungeon, metropolis, microcosm, space sector, starship world, one design a day for a year. So for me, I was really interested in this for a lot of reasons. First of all, over the course of my life, everyone has asked me, do you keep a journal? Why don't you keep a journal? You're so interested in storytelling and writing. Do you journal? And the answer really basically is no. I've never kept a journal. It's just not something that I admire people who keep journals, and I know people who keep journals, and grown-ups who can refer back to journals that they kept as children. I have some pieces of writing here and there in my life that I suppose constitute like a journal, but so haphazard as to not be, they're of interest nominally. So that's one thing, because I've always sort of wanted to be able to keep a journal in a way of thoughts. I love the idea of having a dungeon year design journal as a way of helping me continue to use the resources that I have. I just pulled off my shelf a few of the many dungeon creation random table resources that I have, and I've done videos on lots of these, and I'm just going to quickly show them to you later in this video. But it's just a nice way of picking something up and having like a creative writing exercise for the day or the week or a couple of days a week. Whether or how I will end up using these in sessions, I don't know. I might not. And that's where I will plan to check in with YouTube with the channel at the end of 2024. At least that's my goal, to show you sort of what I've done with this journal, how I have used it, and what it has brought forth. You may see this in videos during the course of the year if it turns out that something I'm doing ends up actually being something I'm playing. I'm just not sure. But if I showed you off camera in the Geek Gamer's office, you would see just a kind of hodgepodge of notebooks with just random little dungeons and notes and things drawn all over the place. I'm not very committed to keeping things in one place, and I will work on a setting or an adventure spot for a specific rule set or a specific session somewhere, and then it's just like left there, and then there's another notebook with something else. So I'm interested to see how things will look when they're all sort of kept in one place, and I think this offers a good structure for doing that. I may, as I said, you may end up seeing this during the course of the year, I'm not sure, or you may just see it again in one video at the end, kind of summarizing what went on with it. So that's a look at the Dungeon Year Design Journal itself, and I'll put a link to where you can pick it up if you're interested in it below. And now I'm going to just show you in a quick review some of the resources that I'm going to use in addition to what the random tables are in here, to give me the prompts and kind of help me to create some of my dungeons, and then see where it goes, because in the end it's really all about where the dungeon creation takes me as opposed to just making the dungeon itself. So I think just for fun, for my own enjoyment and amusement, I'm going to turn to my own dungeon literary random table that's in this A Place Underground, and just roll on it to see what I get and kind of get a little bit of flavor going for what I might do as an initial entry. And then we're going to get into the rest of the volumes that I have, because I want to show you what I will be using. And we'll just look here. I rolled a 43. So we've got, oh, it's an entry from Charlotte Bronte, not somebody you would associate with dungeons, but she wrote, "The legend went, unconfirmed and unaccredited, but still propagated, that this was the portal of a vault, imprisoning deep beneath that ground, on whose surface grass grew and flowers bloomed, the bones of a girl whom a monkish conclave of the drear Middle Ages had here buried alive for some sin against her vow. Her shadow it was that tremblers had feared, though long generations after her poor frame was dust, her black robe and white veil, that for timid eyes moonlight and shade had mocked, as they fluctuated in the night wind through the garden thicket." That's from Villette, 1853, Charlotte Bronte. That's actually, I like that as a beginning, just thematic passage here for my own journal, because it maybe it's going to give me a little bit of an overarching story here, that I am creating this journal as a memory of this, whoever this girl was, as something that will be perhaps given to that spirit as an offering or something. So I don't think I'm going to do much more with that than this, but I wanted something that would just kind of give me, just take me from what can be often the most intimidating thing, which is like a blank page, to just a feeling of something and a story of something. So that is what I got here, and maybe I will even copy that passage in, or parts of that passage in, the beginning of this journal. We'll see when I get back to it. So now for the rest of this video, I pulled a few things off my shelf, and I'm going to just go through some of them and tell you what they are. These are some of my favorite and often used random dungeon generation tools, and then a couple that I'm trying to repurpose for this, and we will see in the end, when there's the follow-up video to this one, what I actually ended up using. All right, so now we're just going to take a look at some of the things I have in this pile here. This is not everything I've got. We already looked at a place underground. This is just what I've pulled off my shelf, and it's not in any particular order. It's kind of like the trim size order of the book, I guess, because I've got the stack here. I have done videos on many of these, not this one actually, but I've done videos on many of these. I will try to put as many links up as possible, but I'm probably not going to be able to put all the links up. But starting out with the sandbox generator. Now, this is not strictly dungeon at all. This is a great resource that covers creating outside, well, a sandbox creates, you can create settlements and you can do dungeons. We'll look at that for a second. You could have sea adventures, and it's just it's a procedure to generate, as it says, a pseudo feudal world with a hint of magic, so familiar to players of the games that we love. And it allows you to, as a GM, to come up with random events and relationships and landmarks and hex maps if you want, and little settlements. There's a lot of good random tables in here. What I'm going to focus on, there is one pretty big, the dungeon section actually has it's a I think it's a D100 table here of special rooms in a dungeon, and then there is a little description for each of the rooms. So if you rolled on, whatever it was, a structural treasure, it's going to explain to you that the unstable ceiling of this room is supported by a pillar. Instead of one of the bricks, there's a gemstone. You could use it, and what might happen if the ceiling collapses. So it's very much helping you create a living dungeon with these random rooms, as well as more localized things like the type of door you might have and the corridor and such. So it's and it gives like a sort of overall theme, and the dungeon section in here is pretty well delineated. So this is one that I am going to use, and just, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. So again, my plan is to, and here, actually, I mentioned earlier the concept of, or I was thinking earlier, I don't think I mentioned it, about coat of arms. There is in here, and something else, I have a way of making coats of arms, and that could be sort of also a fun thing to do with this project. So the sandbox generator will definitely get used. And again, my concept, at least right now, we'll see how it ends up happening, is that I'm going to note in the I'm going to use this to note what resource I have used. And obviously, this will be for whatever drawing portion I have. And disclaimer up front, I am not a great artist. And in fact, people have commented negatively about my drawing skills on other videos, which was, I didn't love, but whatever. But I'm going to do my best. I am going to do some drawing here, obviously. And then I'm going to be using this side to see how I develop whether it's explaining what is here or just giving narrative ideas for a session, or I don't know, we're going to see. But it will be paired with these various resources. And I mention this again only because I know people don't necessarily watch a video from beginning to end. Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing I hope to use are the books I have from 2D6 Dungeon, the game. And I've done a video on this game. It was a big disappointment to me in many ways, but it has these great random tables, and you get a room type, a description, an encounter, of course, which is based on the enemies in this game. You also have things like you could play through, there's interruptions and unexpected table, which is wonderful here. So there's a workbench to one side, you rummage through the drawers and find some random items, then you roll on these tables to get what you find. It's really great in terms of the random stuff that it offers. I just don't like the mechanics of the game at all. I think it just strips everything out of the richness of these tables. So I have been wanting to find a way to use these tables in some other way, and I suspect Four Against Darkness is going to be the pairing that I do in terms of actually playing a game, but I'm certainly going to use these at least once for my weekly, maybe weekly entry. I don't know. I can't promise on how often I'm going to do it, but I am going to attempt weekly. And then I also got this layers expansion, same deal, just different types of rooms and such and encounters. So I will be using this. Maybe I'll use this to generate something that I then send For Against Darkness characters through. Or what I had also planned was just to create some sort of For Against Darkness party and then start rolling on these tables and make them deal with whatever they get and translate as needed the mechanics of items and such that are found in here to For Against Darkness. So that is a plan. And again, this is something that I will use the journal here to map out, and which is, you may see this in that video. So that's another set of resources I'll use. Definitely going to use the Dungeon Dozen. I have done a video on this, and I did a video on 2d6 Dungeon as well. I've done a video on this, and I just bought the volume 2 of the Dungeon Dozen, and I haven't even really looked through it. It just arrived. I bought it kind of on a whim. I wanted to support the designer here of this great resource. You've seen this. I've done a whole video on this, and believe you've seen me pick this up and use it in other videos. It is just a bunch of D12 tables that are just sort of all over the place. Well, we'll look at the table of contents for the volume 2, because this is the one I just got and haven't shown it yet. So you can see they don't really relate to each other. It just sort of happens. So here's a D12 table just about to overrun the wilderness outpost, or my character died, or some NPC encounters with dungeon levels attached, or something like a table for triumphs of the pre-human civilization, or vagabond vampires, or recently swallowed by the mile-long serpent. It's just like stuff. And there is a index in the back, which is helpful to some extent, because it will tell you, for example, if it says that italics indicate the word is either not the main subject or it's used as an adjective. And then otherwise it will give you, like, if you want to look up aristocrats, for example, then I guess table 58 or page 58 itself will have a table that it is more or less, well, freelance dungeon security. So aristocrats are mentioned here. So it's sort of useful in a way, but mostly I think when I have used this book, and I've used the original one I have quite a bit, which is why I purchased the second one, I look through the table of contents and just something sounds good and I roll on it. And I have done this. I have brought this into For Against Darkness games, and I have certainly brought it into other games on the channel. So it doesn't create a dungeon for you, but it has just flavor. I don't want to say flavor, just like very spirited flavor and unusual flavor. So you touch the glyph of monsters. There's a table here. And there are no orcs in this world, and there's a table here. And so you can encounter what? Well, you can encounter the extruded, formed of space-age polymers in very rough human shape and given semblance of life in a factory of chaos at the bottom of a mega dungeon. Hard to kill. It's just super, it's random within the random, but I really do love it, and definitely will be using this probably in conjunction with something else for my dungeon journal. Next up, we have 2 volumes of really, well, it's called Classic Dungeon Design Guide, and book 2 I definitely have done a video on book 1, possibly also book 2. This is very straightforward, random tables for all sorts of dungeon dressing, including very detailed things like the light, the sound, the feeling. Maybe there's a table in here. It's like, is the room cold or whatever? Features of curiosity. We do have air current changes. And the content is good. As I said in my video, the sort of organization of it is not great. It's not, I don't think the design of the book is helping out very much, but it's possible to use it, and I have used it quite a bit, so I do recommend it. But I would love to just redesign I would love to redesign the interior. So we've got dungeon rooms, air, food, water, lore, uh, generating random dungeon themes we have. So it has, it's just a book of random tables, very classic random tables. And it, you can work your way down. They're sort of organized from the bigger to the smaller. So you can start here like with the overall light, and then it will send you to another table like conditions of light sources and light clarity, very, very detailed. And then the second book kind of follows suit with this. There are, like, you could design a cave or a cavern with special features. We can look here. There's chapters or NPCs and much more. Again, it's not laid out in a really user-friendly way, and I think looking at it, it seems like it might be super dry, but there's a lot here. And the let's see, there's a table of contents here. Again, just a lot of NPCs here. I think if you're getting just one of these two, I would definitely get volume 1, but volume 2 can be used in conjunction with it to add some detail. Designing an elaborate fountain or pool room, designing a sinister torture chamber. So again, might use this in conjunction with something else. If I rolled up a pool room, could give it some more detail with these books. Untold Encounters. Pretty sure I did a video not too long ago about this. These are 1,000+ random encounters for any tabletop RPG. It's 5e compatible. The overall book itself is not just focused on dungeons, but there's a whole section on dungeon encounters, including building the dungeon, with a lot of encounter types, and that's really the meat of what this book is. Dungeon encounters A to Z. Now, of course, you could, I mean, there's wilderness here, which is probably differentiated from dungeons, but as we talked about, dungeons means a contained space with what I would call like its own sort of biome, whether it's natural or artificial. So you could have a dungeon, a forest dungeon, for example. But here I will be focusing on what is the dungeon, called the dungeon, and using what's here. What's nice about this is we get the actual encounters, and it is meant to be something that you build and place things in. And again, not sure there's a way to do random dungeon layout. I think with my journaling, perhaps, I think given that the various books offer different ways and procedures for doing the dungeon generation, I imagine that I might make some notes about what I like and what I don't like and what it means for the feeling and the story that I start thinking about based on the procedure for generation. There's a lot here, dungeon boons and things, and we have the details on the doors, and this is just very procedural but nicely detailed with these D100 tables for dungeon fungus spores and things. So there's a lot that goes into it in this, just one section of this book, and then there's a whole table of interactions with NPCs that you might find in the dungeon. So this one is just overall a wonderful resource, as I've said in my video, but even just using a section of it, there's going to be quite a lot here. And moving from that, we come to Central Casting Dungeons, the Ultimate Dungeon Construction Guide. This is an old book from Task Force Games. I've definitely done a video on it, and it says it's for all fantasy role-playing systems. It's great. Well, it is really great. It's extremely detailed, and I'm not going to get so much into how it works and the level of detail that it is, because I did cover that in my video, and I will make an effort to link to that video here. But there is information on construction instructions and specific ways of making doors and corridors and the various dungeon elements that you can have. And what you get here are bigger sections into smaller sections. So there's a whole section on living quarters, and then you would dial down into that, and you would come to, say, a library or a mess hall or the servants' quarters. And there's a whole section on dungeon backgrounds, like why was it built and what was the civilization around it. I might sort of even start there for when I use this. Why was it abandoned? And there's tables on that. And so we can look and see, for example, some of those tables. There's a lot of detail here because of just the design of the book. As you can see, it looks like a design from a while ago, as it is. And you can see, you roll on here, a lot of D100 tables. The dungeon was abandoned because, well, it was successfully attacked and captured by an enemy. The enemy looted it and abandoned it. Go to 815 looted on page 167 to see like what was looted. So it's referring you to subtables within it, and that's kind of the way this book works, or the way this book can work. And they give you within certain sections, like if you roll up, there's an earthquake. Well, there's even a cave-in possibility chart that you can roll on to see, because it's geared toward a DM making an actual dungeon to play in. And then there is a section here on connecting your dungeon to elements in a story, which is great. And I probably reviewed that in my video on the book. I'm not really going to talk about that here, but it does even give you an example of kind of how to write this up, and making an index card that sort of describes the dungeon and connects it to a story. And that's really ultimately what my dungeon journal is going to be doing, albeit not one overarching story, but just story ideas that I get. So I will certainly be using this one. And again, seeing how I feel about the different types of mechanics of something that was published so long ago. I mean, this is pretty unique. I'm not sure there's an actual corollary update to this, although some aspects of the Untold Encounters are, as well as a book we'll look at the end. Next up, I've got my GM's Miscellany Dungeon Dressing, a system neutral resource. This is, you've definitely seen this if you watch the channel. This is Raging Swan Press. I use this often, and it is, I don't know if I've done a video on it alone. I probably have, but it's got dungeon dressing here is not just like there's a sconce on the wall, but it will have things like that, like junk and rubbish, locks, mirrors, doors, dungeon names you've got. But you've also got things like what's in a goblin's pocket. What like candelabras are there? What type of thrones are there? The appearance of that. And then you've got some dungeon riddles that you can put into your dungeon and roll up randomly here. So it really has a ton of stuff, and it's very nicely organized. You know, you can tell pretty clearly what to roll on. So, well, we want to find some lost treasures. Really easy to go there. And again, you can see there's a lot of there's some description here. So dungeon entrances, characteristics, and appearance. There's a discussion of like foreshadowing and what that means in the context of a dungeon. And then these wonderful percentile tables to roll on. Again, I've probably shown this all in another video, but this secret entrances and just a ton of stuff, dungeon names. I'm a little guilty of not working out from a name, but I think that could be a nice thing to do. And again, part of my plan for this, here's the goblin's pockets, shiny treasures like a steel spur in remarkably good shape despite having been removed from its boot, or a spool of fine crimson thread tangled on a wooden bobbin. That I think I will. Here's some mundane chest contents from a priest's chest, or just odds and sundries. A bar of soap lies beside a pile of gray rags inside this chest. So from the very mundane to the very magical in here, statues. I think, getting back to what I was saying about a dungeon name, I think I will probably use the name generation here to start to give some theme to what I'm doing and see how that goes, because that's not something I've done typically. And again, this exercise is going to be also for me to refresh my memory and revisit books that I have on the shelf that maybe, I can't say these are gathering dust because I do use them, but that I haven't used in a while. All right, and then getting toward the end here, the Tome of Adventure Design. This is the revised edition, and I have done extensive coverage of the original edition. Especially this was featured in my video, Easy Ways to Be Your Own GM. This was featured in that video. This is a system neutral, well, it's changed. It was originally a source book for Swords and Wizardry and Pathfinder role-playing game, but now it's just sort of general. It is not, the most of the content is exactly the same. So if you already own this, I bought this owning this, knowing it wasn't that different because I felt I wanted to have it for the channel. And also it does have, along the side of every page, there are just they're unnumbered, but they're just like random like phrases and words and prompts, like it says time gates or an orb or a collector's item. Oops, sorry, you can't see that. Or they are inside the perimeter, just meant to be, I guess, spark ideas. I haven't honestly really found it that useful, but it's there. And that's like the big, I think, selling point for this edition. I'm not sure I could recommend this edition over the other one if you're looking to just buy something that is maybe most affordable, maybe either one, but that you could find for certain amount of money. I don't know. The layout is different. I'm not sure if the original one is available new anymore. I don't know that. But the content itself, the tables really have not changed. And in a lot of ways, I like this layout better. But in any case, this is extremely detailed, and probably a lot of you are familiar with it. I imagine I will use it. It's almost so much material that I find it a little bit maybe overwhelming for this project. It goes into principles and starting points for adventure design, but then there is the section specifically on dungeon design, and just, again, tons of tables, backstory tables, naming an area. I think for this, placing landmarks, again, I think when I'm dealing with something like this, I imagine that I will be thinking as much about the kind of product itself as I am just creating a dungeon and thinking about what it tells me or where it makes me go in my mind. Because I think, so you can see, for me, this is like a more pleasing kind of layout. But in any case, the tome here is it is very comprehensive, and it is a wealth of material that I'm going to use. And as I said, I suspect when I get to using this in my journal, some of the journaling is going to just be thoughts about how material is presented and what, where I go with it, or maybe with something like this, using different entry points into creating a dungeon, whether it's starting with just the name, as I was saying earlier, or the external features, as is often the case. I don't know. And then, of course, this tome has also non-dungeon adventure design here at the last section, which we won't be using: wilderness, underwater, etc. But it does just have a massive amount of random tables for dungeon design. And then finally, we're going to finish up with, again, this is not comprehensive. This isn't everything I have. It's just sort of what I pulled and what I'm definitely envisioning using. We will finish up with an absolute classic, The Dungeon Master's Guide for AD&D by Gary Gygax, essential reference information for game mastering advanced D&D, in addition to all of that. I've done a video on it. I will put the link up here. This is like my one essential book that I have, and special reference work, I think nothing more could be said about that. It is such a special book. I'm not going to go into all the detail about it, but I will say that just the appendices here for the random dungeon generation and random monster encounters, as well as all the appendices on the traps, tricks, dungeon dressing, herbs, spices, and medicinal vegetables, conjured animals, summoned monsters, all of these things I think are just great and are going to come into play. There's other things here too. There's just a ton of random tables in this book to create. Whoops, I ran out of recording memory. It's a theme with this book that when I take it out and start talking about it, I run out of recording memory because there's just so much to say. Anyway, as I was saying, there are many things beyond just the appendices here, but we're going to look here at the appendices for a moment, starting with this random dungeon generation section, which of course relates back to an article that Gary Gygax published in Strategic Review about how to do solo dungeoneering. And, as I've talked about in that video on the Strategic Review, the solo aspect of play was a part of D&D from the very beginning, and this is a reprint of some of that material. So we have the way to create the physical space of the dungeon, as well as creating what the treasure is, who's guarding the treasure. We have the random tables for tricks and traps, stairs, magic pools if we want. There's also some random wilderness terrain. You could situate your dungeon there, tables for random monster encounters and such, as well as the random monsters themselves by level, magic items table here. And so I'm definitely going to be figuring out a way to use this book. It's well beyond the scope of just a dungeon, and indeed it's not even intended to be just that. Of course, it is the DM guide, but there's so much in here, as I've talked about elsewhere, that I will be absolutely using it, and sort of again using the journal as a time to reflect on the source material that I'm using for that particular day or page, and what I think about that material and what it offers, and how the sort of material that I am using functions to create not just the actual dungeon that is being devised, but how it enhances the feeling of a story developing or not. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it hinders it. I think, generally speaking, the resources that I have pulled that I think I will be using are ones they're kind of like my go-to. At least all of these are like my go-to for this kind of thing. I'm going to attempt, as I said, to get some use out of the 2d6 dungeon material outside of the game, and the hope that putting this all together with the Dungeon Year Design Journal, as well as some of the tables that it offers, of course, is going to give me a year of some kind of journaling. And my goal is to check in again at the end of next year to see what I've done. I'm not intending or planning to do this every day, certainly, or I don't know, maybe even I'd like to try to do it at least once a week. But, I've learned to keep those promises vague when it comes to at least the channel here, because I don't want to disappoint. But I do plan on keeping an ongoing dungeon journal this year, and checking back in this time next year to show you what I have done. You may or may not see this making an appearance in videos throughout the coming year. I have not put links to where you can find all this material in the video description, because it's easy enough to do your own searching for current information. A lot of this material is really old, and I wouldn't even know where to give a current date or place as to find it, but you can search for it. I did put a link to the place underground as well as the solo game masters guide. I appreciate all of the support that viewers have given for those books over the past year plus that they've been available, and appreciate the support on the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.